They do have equity. I mean, this isn't rental. When I sell my home, I will get back a reasonable investment. I just can't.
What happens? Can't make a killing on it.
Can't make a killing, and it really is a killing. It kills the community. If I sell let's say it's a $125,000 home now. If I sell it for 3 times that $250,000 killing is, and typically I go somewhere else.
Sure.
I have basically taken value that was created by Orcas Island, and I've taken off with it.
Somewhere else.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Communities everywhere are dealing with the question of how do we get affordable housing for everyone? I'm here on beautiful Orcas Island, and they're grappling with that question too. My guest is Michael Sky. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
You've been involved with the Land Trust, which has been here for a while, and you came here kind of with that idea in your mind. Tell us how it's the OPAL Community Land Trust,
right,
which is different from a land trust. So let's talk about what it is first, and then how did you get involved creating this?
Well, land trusts are generally about preserving land, and community land trusts are about preserving land for people to live on. Mm-hmm. So you have community-owned land and then privately owned homes. So the community, the nonprofit organization, OPAL, owns the land, and it leases it to individuals who own their homes. They don't rent their homes, they own them.
So they have, okay, so let me back up. OPAL stands for Orcas?
Of People and Land.
Orcas, of People and Land.
Right.
So your model is that the land trust, by holding that land themselves as a nonprofit, are not going to be raising the price, the values of the land that are going up as more and more people want. Sure. This is so desirable an area. It's beautiful. I mean, this is a gorgeous island.
That's right.
So, but letting people own their own home gives them the pride of ownership and the care that they'd want to do, and some of the return on their money when they sell that house.
Yeah. There's a commitment to place. The land trust agrees to never sell the land again, so it takes it off the market,
yes,
which is great. And it leases it to individuals with long-term 99-year leases. Mm-hmm. There is some equity, but one of the things that the land trust does, it's very important, that gets us to permanent affordability, is that it limits the resale. There is a limit on the equity that you can get when you go to resell your home.
Aha.
And the formula we use here, there's different approaches, but our formula basically is they take a sort of an economic snapshot of a buyer when they buy the house, and when you go to sell, it has to be affordable. It has to be at a price that would be affordable to somebody at that same economic
so
level.
Snapshot. So let's say your buyer was at, had median income.
It's all that's said.
For the county, right, for the island, what are you using for numbers?
For the county.
For the county.
And it's
okay.
Most people it'll be 80% of the median income or less.
Okay.
Somewhere in that.
And so you do the snapshot, and let's say I'm at 70% of median,
right,
and I buy a home that the land trust leased land. Now I go and sell in 6 years. It will be for somebody who also might be at a 70%
right,
median income level. I see.
And it would have to be affordable, meaning that their mortgage and expenses would have to be at a percentage of their income that would make sense, that they could actually get it, and that the banks would support it.
That's really amazing.
What that does is it allows us to actually project into the future and know that 50 years from now, if a waiter sells his house, another waiter will be able to buy it.
That's really...
and it also prevents a problem that other approaches to this have gotten into, which is that if you just help or subsidize or in some way give a first generation a foot up into a good deal or into a house, but you don't limit it, then eventually it speculates out.
We're back at the same story that we
Right.
have everywhere with a
Gentrification.
free, quote, free
Right.
market, is the values going up
Right.
and the desire going up.
My house, if it wasn't an OPAL house, would be worth 2 or 3 times what I
Really?
could sell it for.
And so
easily.
how long ago did you, let's go back, we didn't get at our beginnings. How did you come to the island? How did you get involved in shaping this land trust?
My wife and I were living in Massachusetts, and we read about community land trust in a magazine called In Context. And it just got me, and especially the not selling the land. I was at that point thinking that people's relationship to land was almost like slavery, that this idea that you could own land and do whatever you wanted to it, and nobody could stop you because private property, private ownership
Was the top of the, was
Right.
the be-all, end-all?
and that notion was a large part of things that were going wrong in our culture, environmentally and socially, and social inequities, and communities that were being torn apart by wealth coming in, pushing poor
Pushing the
people
ordinary
out.
folk out, yes.
Right. So we were just jazzed by that, and we couldn't really make it happen where we were at the time, and a number of other factors pulled us out to Orcas Island. And so in 1988, we arrived here and were immediately introduced to a man who has lived here for a long time and also had read the same magazine and had been sort of trying to get people interested in land trust. And
And who was that?
Peter Fisher.
Okay.
And my wife and I had real sort of group organizational skills. And the three of us just meshed, and we met him about a week after we arrived here and had our first public meetings in a couple months, had
Wow.
60 people filled a room the very first time we had a meeting. And then came the long, I guess 5 or 6 year process of constant meetings and
So you were forming an organization
and nonprofit status
Right.
and fundraising and all of that. And we built our first group of 18 homes called OPAL Commons that I live in about 11 years ago.
Okay, so that's pretty early in the game, actually, relatively speaking.
Took us 6 or 7 years.
Well, so you had not only building the organization, but you had to get land for that neighborhood, for where
That's
you
right.
are. So did the land trust buy that land? Was it donated? How did you get that?
We got government grants.
Uh-huh.
We found 2 to start with. One was a community development block grant. That's a federal program that used to be a lot more than it is now. And they gave us $80,000, which covered the cost of the land. We found an old islander willing buyer. We'd gotten advice from people who had done this back east to find a piece of land that nobody really cared about, so that you wouldn't bring up opposition. And we found a nice 7-acre place. And then we got another grant for $300,000
Wow.
that could be used for people that were at 50% of the median or less, which is, you can't imagine how little money that is. That would make it possible for them to be homeowners. But even then, we still weren't close to really actually making mortgages happen. And then we got into a farmer's home program that enabled us to basically to lower people's mortgage to as low as 1%.
Wow.
But it wasn't a grant. It's sort of like a loan that when the house sells, the government recaptures all of that,
The money they put in
all of
to
that interest. And when we got that, it suddenly was possible. And
So in that first, you call it a neighborhood.
yes,
It's not a project, it's a neighborhood.
Right.
What was built? What did you build there?
18 homes on
Separate individual homes?
right
Okay.
on 7 acres, and they're in clusters. One of the other real advantages to building this way is that it enables you to cluster houses, so that you keep your footprint smaller. I mean, we have 7 acres, and part of that, a good 2 acres, is open and a garden, and we build it in a way that the parking and cars are all on the outside, so there's this interior open space where kids can run around and play and everything. It's
So
quite
this
friendly.
isn't quite the same as co-housing, is it?
Not quite, but we studied co-housing at the time. We don't have a common building the way co-housing usually does, but a lot of the other, and we actually have larger units than most co-housing goes for, but it's a lot of similarities. We learned a lot from the co-housing model at the time we were doing this.
Well, it's certainly taking that smaller footprint and leaving some of the area wild and clustering,
Right.
you know, is going to be a part of it.
Co-housing usually doesn't limit equity on resale, so it's
That would be a
not
factor.
a permanently affordable housing solution.
Thank you for the reminder. That's, you know, that's one of those critical factors.
Which I should say wasn't what got me into this at all. As you know, I was moved by, again, the relationship to land, the idea that anything that happens on OPAL land requires the guidance or permission or thinking of a community rather than just an individual. I can't just turn around and decide to cut down my trees or start using pesticides or you know,
So are there agreements or covenants that
Yeah.
you have as being an owner of a house on an OPAL neighborhood
That's right.
that include that kind of care?
Yes.
Do you need to go back to the land trust? Is that who makes sure those are kept in force, or is it with the other owners of houses? Who
It kind of
does that?
varies and it's developed over time, but ultimately, yes, the land trust would have final say if there was some sort of a dispute. We try not to be too top down in managing things either, but there are covenants that, like any housing association,
Sure.
but they extend to the land, and ultimately, if it was a decision, especially on the common land, it would require the greater community to sign off.
And I would
on it.
imagine that greater community includes all of the homeowners as well as the land trust, because
As well
those
as
are
the
all your
land trust.
stakeholders here.
That's right, and in this case, a large part of the Orcas community really supports this. So.
Well, I can imagine that having affordable housing that's going to stay affordable is of great service to your community.
Huge.
It makes sure you will still have school teachers and firemen and people who cannot otherwise. I mean, because your island doesn't have an industry particularly, right? I mean, what's your economic picture here for
Well,
folks?
this is a vacation spot, and it's one of those little hidden paradise things that was then discovered, and yeah, there's a lot of millionaires living here, building 50,000 square foot homes and all of that, and what they do, and a lot of these folks are my friends, but what they do is they change the economic picture in a way that just skews reality completely.
Well,
so that we have the highest priced housing in the state of Washington. We have the lowest median wages in the state of Washington.
So you've got the biggest gap of the haves and the
That's right.
have-nots
We
right
do.
here on this little microcosm of an island.
Right, and all of that was really just starting to take off as a problem just as we arrived. So we were fortunate enough to start this when we did. My wife and I, again, from Massachusetts, we'd looked at Martha's Vineyard, we'd looked at Nantucket, I mean, we'd experienced those, and we knew it was coming, and we were among, we were the Paul Reveres of here, like, we'd better do something fast, or
Or we're going to
just
turn into a Martha's Vineyard
not
or
gonna
Nantucket,
be any
and
place.
there won't be any place for the just folks.
on an island, the poor folk can't live on the other side of the tracks and take the bus to work. You have to find a way for everyone to live here and to be able to afford it. And we're quite fortunate. We've got, I think, about 60 homes right now.
So you have multiple neighborhoods.
Absolutely, yeah.
So-
We've got 4 neighborhoods with 6 6 is the smallest and 24 is the largest. We've got a number of single standing houses that we just went out and converted separate. And we do have some apartment rentals. And we're in the process of what I believe could be about a 40 house
neighborhood, right.
Right.
Also trying to have a reduced footprint, or is it already built on? I mean, it sounds like you've both have built on raw land, and you've also is that right?
We've
purchased some
just
homes?
a few, but all of the neighborhoods were built on raw land. Yeah. And with each one, we've gotten more environmentally conscious. When we started, the one I live in, we were doing in the first Bush administration, really. And there wasn't even any language in the government for environmental sustainability at that point in time. And we weren't really able to pursue some of the goals that are important to me. But with each succeeding one, we've done more. The second one, for instance, we logged with a horse. A
horse-drawn logging,
right. You know, so there was very
minimum
little damage to
on the land.
Right. Whereas ours, it was sort of the old go down and cut down all the trees, even though we tried not to do that. But and now the one coming up, there's a lot of green design, and they're going to be designing the houses so passive solar and all of those sorts of.
Actually, that brings up a good thought, is that you have the opportunity, since they aren't built yet, to do zero or low energy homes, which are going to make them all the more valuable.
That's right.
For people.
That's right.
Which is,
that's what, and we were looking for that right from the start. A lot of us felt that way, but when we started it, no one ever believed this would happen, including myself. It was very pie in the sky. And so it was hard we had to develop credibility to really do things the way we want.
And to be able to be here long enough that people will expect you to continue to be. I mean, that's one of the challenges of a land trust, is if that land is to be always monitored or stewarded by the land trust, you got to know you have an organization that's got a long-term life.
That's right.
To continue that role. What kind of challenges and hurdles did you run into along the way? I certainly finding funding has got to be part of it. Did you have other obstacles that you have found or are finding to doing what you're doing? Raising enough money, or working with the government, or anything? I
think funding's the biggest. We didn't run into opposition from our local community.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I was surprised. I mean, at times I expected more. You know, we have a small town letter to the editors, sort of a thing that happens here. There have only been a couple in all the years that we've been here that were negative in any way about what we were doing. Again, because I think everyone sees the problem, and especially now, it's hard not to see that they're the teachers and the people in the fire department that are living in these houses. People get that. But the funding has been hard, and in 1994, when Republicans took over the Congress, it was a real turning point. I mean, money for these types of developments just dried up, and it became, in a way, it was a positive challenge, because the land trust turned to the local banks and just went and figured it out. And by that time, the banks, they had been watching what was going on too, and they've made just really great efforts to find ways to create mortgages for these houses.
To make it financing. Yeah. Wow. So are there any, what's on the horizon for the land trust, the community land trust?
Well, more houses mostly. Our land trust has become a model for the rest of the country. So our executive director travels all around the country helping other people to set up their own, and in fact has recently become the president of the sort of the national community land trust movement.
Great.
So it's
That's
going
exciting.
out there.
I mean, you're passing it on to waves more. and more projects and more houses.
Right. I would like my personal, and I'm not part of the, I'm not on the board anymore, but I still am, I would like to see this get beyond the idea that it's affordable, strictly an affordable housing solution for people that can't get their houses any other way. I would like it to become a model to all Americans as a better way to do the housing thing. Instead of seeing your house as a long-term investment and a way to put your children through college, because what that does is, by definition, drive housing and land up in price all in perpetuity. It's because so many people have made their house their primary investment,
right. That's
and
right.
because everybody wants to win, we have by definition said that houses will always be doubling in prices, except for people who really, except in disaster cases.
Yes.
Either things are going terribly and your house isn't going up, or
It's going up like crazy.
So it just seemed, that to me is a lose-lose situation that breaks down either for individuals because they didn't win, or for communities because the price of housing is going through the roof. And so my goal, what I would love to see is people of means voluntarily deeding their land over to the land trust and putting a limit on their resale, and then taking, doing investments in another area. And it would have to, it's the sort of thing that I'm just waiting for the first volunteer.
You hear that, folks? We're looking for a volunteer, and there are good people of wealth, of good conscience, who know that wealth, part of what they want to do is use it well, is use it wisely. And I can imagine that there will be people that will step forward and realize that for the long term, for their grandchildren, and also for their own sake, because if you don't have hospital workers, and you don't have teachers, and you don't have librarians, you don't have the services that wealthy people need for just, the folks, prepping the food at the grocery store or the restaurant. That it's in their own best interest as well. That's
the thing about an island is that I think that the wealthier people it's obvious to them here, because again, those people that do all those things can't live in one of the other smaller communities or less well-off communities. We're certainly all in this together, and we've gotten tons of support from all parts of the island in doing this.
I think that that notion, what I can imagine you're talking about, is in a sense a vision that's beyond private property. You're envisioning partly the commons that we used to have, that there was land that the village owned in common, whether it was pasture land or the square or the park, and it was for the good of everybody, and it was shared and managed together. Right. So this reminds me a little, though the form of it is quite different, because you have individual home ownership, which has the blessing in it. If the land trust, had you considered being a landlord, of your owning all the homes, of the land trust owning all the homes, and then just renting them, that's a different model.
It's a different model, and that's basically sort of the 60s maybe public housing model.
Right. And here, with ownership, you get people who will improve their homes and take care of them and know that they will make a good return and, in a sense, give back as they were given to.
They have legacy, they have security. They have security, you can't tell them to move. They have legacy, they can pass the home on to their family. And they do have equity. I mean, this isn't renting. When I sell my home, I will get back a reasonable investment. I just can't.
Can't make a killing on it.
Can't make a killing, and it really is a killing. It kills the community. If I did what I said I could do, if I sell my, let's say it's a $125,000 home now, if I sell it for 3 times that $250,000 killing is, and typically I go somewhere else.
Sure.
I have basically taken value that was created by Orcas Island and I've taken off with it.
Somewhere else.
And the community suffers. It is actually, something is taken out of it when somebody does that. And I say that again, you know, all these people I know and love, you know, it is the American way right now that your home is your investment.
That's right.
And I just think it's a mistake.
You're really engendering a larger consciousness of connection with that community. Not just me and my private wealth, which I have the right to pick up and take and do whatever I want, which is indeed the American way, or certainly the capitalistic way.
Right.
What you're talking about is a kind of community consciousness about that wealth and about living.
Right. Because that value, that speculative value that I'm talking about, I didn't do that.
That's true.
My home isn't worth 3 times
That's true.
for anything that I did.
It's an artificial.
It's
Something.
created by, it's everything. It's Orcus, it's the weather, it's the people. All of that sort of added together is what gives the home its value. So it's really not fair for me to take that. And
You know, I really appreciate the consciousness that you're coming from. It's very, it's bigger than myself kind of consciousness. And I think that the model that the land trust, your community land trust is making, I'm heartened to hear that's happening in other communities. I think it needs to be spread far and wide, just like you're envisioning. May it happen. May it happen. Thank you for joining me. This has been very enlightening kind of conversation.
it's been a pleasure.
And may it continue. Thank you. You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Join me next time.
Peak Moment Television, presented by Yuba Gals Independent Media, produced by Janaea Donaldson.